One of the things that I've done in gut check is to try and give people maybe a better understanding that much of what is going on in their head, including addiction, including depression, including anxiety, uh, is actually coming from the bacteria in their gut. And as most of us really do not want to believe that we are the highest advanced creature of all time, that, my gosh, we are pretty special. And we don't really like the concept that a single cell microscopic organism could possibly control our behavior, could possibly control our wants and our needs. And yet, throughout Gut Check, in fact, the first chapter is all about how a single cell protozoan toxoplasma can actually rewire our dopamine circuits in our brain so that we seek out excitement, we seek out danger, we live on the edge, we want our dopamine receptors to be stimulated, and it's all because of this single cell organism wants and does take control of our brain. And the exciting thing is, and the reason I see a number of addicts is that um, when we change their gut makeup, when we give them foods that their good guys in their gut like, these guys literally make compounds. They make GABA, for instance, that calms down dopamine receptors. It even manipulates dopamine. And the exciting thing is, there is hope that we've gotten our gut bugs so screwed up through the things I write about in all my books that, in a way, it's no wonder that our world is just filled with addictive behavior. You name it, it really kind of comes from the same source. uh, you know, whether it's bulimia, whether it's cutting, whether it's pornography, whether it's gambling. We're after that dopamine hit in one way or another. And now we know that this is being controlled, or lack thereof, by the mix up of the gut bacteria.
Yeah, obviously I want to drive everybody to get the book. I know it's coming out. The latest book is coming out in January, but I'd love if we could maybe stay here for just a short minute and maybe get somewhat tactical, right? Mentioned before we hit record the work that we're doing with Rebuilt Recovery, working specifically with men all across the world that are struggling with pornography addiction. We have an approach that we take centered around an elimination-based diet, a carnivorous type of approach. It's something that I experienced in my life, and without having any real scientific evidence to support, I'm like, this. There's something behind this, and I've had it validated multiple times with experts and doctors like yourself. So, for the guys that are out there, maybe listening this, that are maybe not a part of our program, they're maybe not into the coaching, but they're struggling with some of these addictive behaviors. Maybe it's with pornography, maybe it's with gambling, maybe it's with video games, maybe there's a woman out there that is struggling with maybe a shopping addiction. What are some steps that they can take with this toxoplasmosis that you were referencing there, like to actually begin to heal, reset, reboot, and get that healthy dopamine receptors firing in the way that we're now chasing the real dopamine and wanting to stay away from that artificial overstimulation?
So one of the things we've come to realize is, there's 100 trillion bacteria in our gut. To give you some idea of how massive a number that is, recently it's been discovered a count that there's 3 trillion trees in the world. So that means, yeah, 3 trillion. It's a lot of trees, but there's 97 trillion more bacteria in our gut than there are trees in the world. So, and believe it or not, these bacteria act as a tropical rainforest. They are the most, complex ecosystem that you could imagine. And like any tropical rainforest or ecosystem, there are all sorts of species that occupy niches, that fight for resources, that share resources. One bug does something, and what we're finding out is that most of us, uh, through no real fault of our own, have killed off this tropical rainforest that literally napalmed it, burned it to the ground. And it's no wonder that we no longer receive all of these signals, all of these hormones, all of these manipulating bug factors. We've killed them off with antibiotics that we've even either taken ourselves. Anybody gets a little sniffle, and some doc will give you an antibiotic, and it won't work because it's a virus, but you're going to take it anyway. We feed our animals antibiotics. 70% of all the antibiotics in the United States are fed to animals. Just 2 weeks ago, looking at fast food meals, every fast food meal had veterinary antibiotics in that fast food meal. Whether it was chicken, a burger, you name it, they were in there. So what? Well, those antibiotics kill off our microbiome. So every time, we go to the drive-through because we're in a hurry, or, fast food, we're eating broad spectrum antibiotics that, I mean, it's like napalming or carpet bombing every day our gut microbiome. The other thing that is really important, we now spray Roundup on everything. Roundup is sprayed on all conventional crops, not just GMO crops. And Roundup, people don't realize the active ingredient glyphosate was patented by Monsanto as an antibiotic. It wasn't patented as a weed killer. And you go, wait a minute. They're not washing this glyphosate off of our foods that we're eating, that are fed to our animals. And glyphosate, every time we eat it, it actually kills off specifically the bacteria that make all the feel good hormones, for instance, like serotonin. And so it's no wonder that we're all anxious, we're all depressed, we're all, addicted to something to get a dopamine hit that never actually calms down because our bugs no longer make GABA, which tells dopamine, hey, just calm down a little bit, would you? So it's no wonder that we're all in this place. And we all want to point to social media, and we all want to point to, video games or whatever. But we really need to point to how we messed up this normal modulating factor. For instance, we know that women with bulimia or anorexia have a really crazy, weird microbiome. And if you correct that microbiome, their bulimia and anorexia go away. And, don't get me wrong, counseling is a great idea. But in most of these cases, it wasn't their, overbearing mother or their absent father. It was probably the fast food that did it.
Yeah, well, there's so much talk and conversation in the counseling, therapeutic, coaching space about getting to the root of these addictions. And I think so many people hear that and they're like, dad beat me in the past, dad was absent, I got bullied, maybe I was sexually abused, which obviously does happen, right? So I'm not negating any of that. What I'm hearing you say is oftentimes for a vast majority of these addictions, it's the root is the gut.
Yeah. Just like Hippocrates said, all disease begins in the gut. I mean, how this guy knew this 2,500 years ago, I've spent, my career now trying to figure it out. And I get closer to understanding it with every year. I mean, we didn't even know these guys, these 100 trillion organisms existed up until the start of the Human Microbiome Project in 2006, and it was just finished in 2017. I mean, it's like, discovering, that life can occur 5 miles deep in a black ocean, and you go, well, nothing can live down there. And then you send a deep diving machine down there and go, oh my gosh, there's all these creatures down there. How can they?
What does the modern world we have access to more information than ever. There's constant stimulation. I mean, I can remember growing up, my grandpa, I talk about him a lot. He was the calmest, gentle man, like Navy veteran, masculine, but at the same time, like just at peace. Like his nervous system, he was in full control, but he grew up in a completely different time. We're in a world and an environment with social media overstimulation. We have access to more information than ever. People are going to hear this podcast. A handful of them will take one thing from it, but let's be honest. You and I both know most people are just going to hear this. It's going to go in one ear, out the other, and going to be looking for the next thing. It's almost that there's too much. What is this modern world overstimulation, stress, dopamine, excess doing to the nervous system and rewiring our brains in real time?
Well, first of all, neuroscience says if we can get one new thought in today, Frank, we've won. Because one new thought, the whole brain has to rewire around a constellation of new ideas and concepts around that one thought. So that one thought has a cascade effect across their whole thought process. So hopefully we get one thought in there. That's my goal every time I give a talk. If I can get one new thought in there. Now, what's happening? They say that we have the attention span now of a goldfish, about six seconds. And and what they've actually shown, there was a study that I just read that says we're bombarded with 2,000 different food ads every day. That's the average American. And it's not food. They shouldn't even call it food. Most of it is not food. If the dogs won't eat it, then you shouldn't be eating it. If it doesn't make them, like they go, the dogs can't have chocolate. I go, well, that should be a sign. What's going on. Different things like that. So, but I think the main thing is that we're taught now that it's now and it's not entertainment anymore. They want to be educated and entertained at the same time. So when these teachers are up in school trying to teach, and they just got done playing whatever video game, they don't compare. There's one of my favorite sayings with my clients was, all unhappiness stems from unfavorable comparisons. So when you think about whatever you're unhappy about, it's probably because you're comparing yourself or someone else to this or that. And, if you just stop comparing yourself, but in this day and age, they've made it so you can't have honest conversations with people. You either got to believe like me or you're something else, and it's like, no, everybody has their own beliefs. Everybody has their own path. I don't really care, what people do, just don't tell me what to do. You know what I mean? It's like, we all have our own way. And I think now what's happening to our brains is we're being told where to go get information. We're being told what to think, but we're really missing out on that how to think equation. People need to challenge themselves. In order to keep that neuroplasticity, which really means energy in the brain, for people wondering, they used to think the brain was fixed, like we were like a record and the grooves were set by the time we were 7 and all we could do is run around in those grooves. What we found out now is it's the exact opposite. When we were born, and now I'll put this in energy equation for you. When we were born, our brains were operating at 18.1 volts. Okay. They were electric. We could think, we could act. We basically absorbed life. And within a couple of years, and I didn't notice this with my own kids, but my grandkids, I noticed it, they became little adults, in just overnight. It's like, how did they do that? And I still remember I put it in my first book. I've written 10 books, but the one book is called Awaken the Genius. And my dad had a friend, and the teacher came to him and said, I don't think little Jimmy can learn Spanish. He's not smart enough. And so the father, without missing a beat, said, can you teach him what the dumb kids learn in Spain? It's like people don't even think, they don't know how to think. It's not about, there's so many little exercises like that or lessons, and people need to challenge them, or what we call reframe those setbacks and those things. And if you're going through something right now, because what's really popular right now is, victimhood and, people, wanting to blame other things or other people on it, then just know that that's your schoolhouse right now. To get your superpower, just like everyone, you have to go through that dark cave and meet your father or whatever. You have to go through that stuff, because on the other end, guess what? You now have a skill. You have a very important capability that other people, I always say, now you have an ability. So now you have to respond to that ability. That means responsibility. right? That's every superhero has, right? So when you think about every person out there, if everybody could step up and really take on their superhero persona, it'd be a whole different world out there, because you wouldn't be looking for other people to save you. You'd be saving other people. We already have enough people to save. I can tell you that. We need to wake up, and the heroes need to step up.
I'm glad you called out the victim kind of trauma culture. That's one thing I've spoken pretty openly about here on this podcast and in our other work here as well. It's across social media everywhere. And I haven't been able to pinpoint like what's the root of this, but I think you're the only other person I've heard actually like call it out. It's like there's this victim culture. So I'm really curious, kind of like, what is that rooted in?
Well, I think as soon as you become a victim, you have to rely on other people and other things. If one of the parts about waking up as a human is that you take responsibility for your successes and your failures. I mean, in one of the guys that was one of my mentors, he said, all those people you keep complaining about, those were your teachers. That's why they keep showing up. Until you learn from them, the universe is going to keep sending you teachers. So learn from it. It's my responsibility to do that. Now that I know it, first time, yeah, it's shame on them. Like what they say, second time, shame on me. And there's been some. So one of the things we did, just to put that in perspective, you hire somebody and you think they're going to change the world for you, and then you find out they're a turd, and you go, oh man, what am I going to do with this person? And so, but this person said, would you think you have to fire somebody? Fire them right away. And so we got back to the office, we fired them, and it was the best thing we ever did. We found out all this other stuff. I mean, your intuition, if you're the leader, be the leader. And sometimes it's not nice, but there's bigger things at play here, and mental health is super important, because as long as you have that stressor on, we have 100% energy. We wake up in the morning, 100% energy. What are you putting your energy on? Because that's who you're serving. Are you putting your energy on getting healthy, living a vibrant life, helping your community, your family, whatever? Those are all noble things, but are you spending your time going, oh, poor me? And I think people are getting rewarded for it. It's like, we used to call it stroking back in the 70s in psychology, where, if you can't get a positive stroke, you get a negative stroke, kids. So if you don't praise them, they're going to act out, so they get attention. There's different ways of looking at it. So I think in for whatever reason, our media loves victims, and so they play them up, like they parade them out there like ponies at a show or something, and then they just eat it up and they get their 15 minutes of fame, but then they don't see what that person goes through when they go home. It's being the victim takes a lot of energy. Just like I tell people, almost everybody, maybe not the guys on the call here, but the girls for sure, you'll get so upset, you'll just break down crying. And then after you get done crying, you got to take a nap. That's because that took a lot of energy. Remember, the body is like a transducer. It's holding energy and has to discharge. If we don't have a good way to discharge, that's why eating those good foods is a discharge. Exercise is a discharge. Doing mindfulness or brain tap, whatever it is, that's a discharge. We need to keep the cells, those mitochondria, their whole job is to absorb light energy and transmit light energy as the form of codes through our DNA that tells us every 40 seconds who we are in this moment in time, not the last moment, this moment. But so many people want to drag their past on with them. In the one book, I actually call it the dragons of the past, because people want to drag it on and drag it on and drag it on. And they wear it on their shoulder. They have a little badge that says, "This is me, poor me, I'm a victim." I have a chapter that says, I was blessed to be the son of an alcoholic," instead of, poor me, my dad was an alcoholic. I'm Irish, so I should be, have a beer here having this podcast. That's the way people think about Irishmen. But that doesn't have to be that way, right? You can change anything you want to change if you put the mindset to it, and then you take the action, because they say faith without works is dead. So you got to do the work.
A lot of times people play victim to circumstances, victim to past events, victim to trauma. They're like, these things happen to me, so I have these conditions in my brain or in my body, and I can't change. And it's like, no, you always have the choice. You always have the decision. It sounds like, the mind is our ultimate source of responsibility.
I love how you said that. It is because our mind has got different levels, and we have the messy mind, which is the one that we do life with. It's the one that we consciously aware, the conscious connection and being aware. Then we have our wise mind, which is pretty much what we call our non-conscious mind in science, and that works 24/7, and it's driving how we function. But it also plays a massive protective role. It's where our wisdom resides, and wisdom is something that protects us. Wisdom is something that's always looking for what are the things that are tripping us up. And it scans all the memories that are clustered into thoughts, because memories are details that are clustered into, like memories are grouped together into these thought patterns or thought networks that look like trees. And your non-conscious mind's always scanning those 24/7, find what's disruptive, and then it sends signals, channels signals through the subconscious, which is like a little bridge or a doorway into the conscious mind. And the reason it sends those through is that, okay, it identifies, hey, this is disruptive, this way of thinking, or this thing that you've been exposed to, or this thing that you're thinking about too much, or whatever, is getting strong, because whatever you're thinking about is growing in your brain and in your mind and in your body. And so the non-conscious mind scans what the messy mind is growing. And then it sends signals through to say, hey, pay attention, because this is disrupting your thought life, it's disrupting your relationships, it's whatever it is. And we as humans use our wise mind to stand back and observe our messy mind via our signals, and then we can change things. And that's really, I mean, it's actually that simple. It's hard to do, but to understand it is that simple. I mean, when you said like people get stuck, that is so true, because whatever you think about the most will grow, and it's growing in three places. So if you are constantly looking at a certain type of whatever, like social media, you're stuck on social media, or you're reading a certain type of whatever you're focusing on the most is growing. It's growing literally because that your mind reads it, your mind puts it into your brain as an energy wave. That energy waves creates all kinds of neurochemical and energetic and genetic responses in the brain. And then that means a genetic response is then something's made. Genes result in creation of material, and that material is amino acids that form proteins. And those proteins hold the information in the form of vibrations. And so the more information that comes in, the more proteins are needed, and those proteins join together and grow into branch-like structures. And these are the thought networks that are made of this information, which is memories, all clustered together. And so whatever you're thinking about is then adding more and more and more, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then that if it's good, great, it's going to grow your brain health and your body health and your mind health and your sharpen optimization levels in your life. But if it's toxic, in any way, and there's different levels of toxicity on a scale of 1 to 10, that is going to get bigger and disrupt your physiological functioning, which is the psychoneurobiology aspect. It's going to disrupt brain function. It's going to disrupt messy mind function. It's going to make the mind even more messy. So there's that feedback loop going. And some of the research I do shows that, and we can talk about that in a moment. But essentially, we can see when someone isn't managing their mind. We will see. I use QEEG, myself and my team, for our neuroscience research, because it shows us millions of reactions in a second, and it's showing the energetic response of the brain, which is pretty much the precursor to driving the chemical responses in the brain, and the neurochemicals and the hormones and the genetic responses and the changes. And then when those changes are created, it's also measuring what those changes are, this new structural function, the neuroplasticity. So we use that to see what's going on in the brain. And then we also look at the response in the body, because as soon as you have an experience like this conversation now, your mind is taking these energy waves, sound waves, light waves, and so on, gravitational fields, processing it into the brain. Your psychology part of your mind is thinking, feeling, and choosing around what you're hearing. All of this is put in the brain. All this energy stuff happens, and proteins form and the trees grow, and that changes the brain. That then immediately sends an instruction down to the body. And in every cell of the body, we have these little, for want of a simple explanations, like a whole lot of beads that are sewn up together and then rolled into almost like a little blanket. So if you imagine lots and lots of beads being threaded together and rolled up, those are called microtubules, and every protein is holding information. And so in the brain, it's a tree-like structure. In the cells, it's like a rolled up little sort of beaded blanket. And in the mind, it's a wave. Like if you're looking at a podcast, you see a wave. So every experience is going in triplicate, and each with a different level of impact. And the three work together, influencing how you show up. So if you're having a toxic experience, then it's this very jagged gravitational field in the mind. And that's moving through the entire body. It's not outside, it's around and all of us. It's through the entire body. This is why our heart palpitates and we get this nervous reaction and we feel things in our bodies because it's going through the entire body. It then builds in the brain and immediately starts almost synonymously the experience builds into those little wired up blankets. And if it's toxic, the tree is not going to look like a beautiful, lush green tree. It's going to look like something toxic, like a broken, burnt tree, very much alive. Sort of the in the Lord of the Rings or something. Think of those trees that were so scary, something like that. And those rolled up blankets aren't rolled up; they start unrolling, and that then creates a vulnerability in the brain and a vulnerability in the body. And then we can pick up that kind of vulnerability through how the immune system responds. So then we pick up things like increased cortisol, increased ACTH, increased DHEA, changes in prolactin levels, changes in telomeres, which are the ends of chromosomes, which influence cell division. In other words, we'll see signs in our biology of that disruption. When those things start unwinding from that toxic tree's instructions, then that's when we start seeing vulnerability in our body, and then disease states start setting into our body over time. That's the whole psychoneurobiological process. And now that process we can recognize, with our wise mind, we can train ourselves to recognize all those signals. Then we can learn to do something about those signals, which is incredibly powerful. So we need to train ourselves in mind management. We need to manage our minds. So the messy mind needs to be managed by the wise mind. And that wise mind is the core of our humanity. It's that deep spiritual wisdom. And an example of our wise mind is someone comes to you and asks you for some advice, and you listen to their story and you give them great advice. And you think, geez, why don't I take that advice myself, kind of thing. We're really good at seeing other people's issues, and we're not always so good at like seeing our own and giving ourselves taking our own advice. And that's a skill we need to learn. We need to learn to listen to that inner core wisdom and become listeners. And that also comes from like listening to podcasts like yours and learning all this, because the more knowledge that you build, the more you listen, you're actually wiring that into your brain. So along with the experiences of life, we are also wiring in knowledge all the time, and our wise mind will draw down on the knowledge that is good for you. And that's why continued learning is absolutely essential for optimal functioning. So following podcasts like yours and mine are great, because we're giving information that's very much building in the insurance policy networks in our brain that guide us. With this non-conscious mind being so alert at helping to identify the toxicity in us, it'll send these signals through. So the first point of training yourself to listen to the non-conscious mind is to practice the skill of listening to your signals. And we have 4 categories of signals. And those categories of signals are our emotions. Emotions are not illnesses. Emotions are incredibly important. Uh, Behaviors, what you say and do and how you say and do it. Your bodily sensations, what your body's telling you. And then your perspectives, how you're looking at life. Those are 4 categories. And obviously they can expand into a multitude of different behaviors and emotions and all that kind of thing. So think of for a moment, just come away from the signals and pretend my hands are scales. Those like old fashioned with a balancing thing in the middle, and you put, you're buying something from those old fashioned shops, and they put the cheese in one side to weigh the
Oh,
amount
and
of
it
cheese.
bounces it. Yeah.
These scales, and then it kind of bounces, and they put weights on the one side. So that's the visual I want you to imagine now. And now all our experiences we have. On this side, we've got all our good experiences, and this side, all our bad experiences. And there's a bad, when we're managing our mind via observing our signals and doing all the things that I'm starting to explain, you keeping this balance, because the bad stuff is also telling you stuff. It's not that you want to eliminate the bad stuff. We want to be able to learn from the bad stuff and make it work for us. We want it to become constructive. Because what happens is the bad stuff can get us stuck in guilt, and we don't know how to manage it. So we start tipping, and the scale starts tipping, and then we can dive deep into negative things. So in this side and in this side, we have emotions, we have behaviors, we have perspectives, and we have bodily sensations. On this side, we would have things like depression and bipolar behaviors, and I'm giving extreme states, life sucks, and extreme pain in one's body or something. Now, that's also still, we mustn't see those as bad. We must see those as information. This side would be like good things, like happiness and body feeling great and life's going whatever. So a great conversation like this where we're learning and that sort of thing. So what we want to do, in life with mind management is look at our signals that we are getting. When we get the good signals, don't just gloss over a great conversation or something that pops your mind that just makes you happy. Like, for example, my granddaughter, I just think of her face and it makes me happy. I won't just let it pass through in 1 second. I'll actually stop and take 5 seconds to visualize and recall what it felt like when I saw her for the first time or something like that. And that wires in a network into my brain that is increasing my resilience and unmasking my resilience. So you want to pay attention to the good stuff when you get signaled, when it pops to your mind. You also want to pay attention to the bad stuff because the bad stuff has also got information. And if you grab it, you control it, and then you're empowered to change it and to make it work for you. Otherwise, it will drag you down and keep you down there. So instead of saying, "Oh, I'm so bad, I'm doing this," because I know you help a lot of men with pornography addiction and that kind of thing. Any kind of addiction is basically a coping, it's a behavior. So in this particular scale, pornography addiction would be a behavior. And then there's emotions that go with it, which are guilt, desire, all kinds of things. There's bodily sensations, we can guess what those are. And then there's perspective. Why do I always do this? I'm stuck in this. So that's just a very, very broad example. So instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm so bad, I shouldn't do this," which can start tipping the scales and will just actually make you worse and make the addiction worse. What we need to do is say, okay, well, I recognize that it's a mess. It's okay to be a mess. I'm being messy in this. What can I learn from that? Let me identify those emotions. And then what you do is you start a process. So that's the frame. I've set up the frame, sort of the frame. Now you start the process of saying, okay, what are my actual emotions in this moment? Don't think of in general, just think in this moment where I'm feeling a bit stuck. And then, just say my emotions are, I feel whatever. It could be guilt, it could be remorse, it could be desire, whatever. Just label them, no judgment, just very clinical, very organized, very deliberate. Then you would go to what are my behaviors in this moment? Once again, just create a sentence. What is my perspective in the moment? What are my bodily sensations in the moment? As you do that, you are gathering awareness of these 4 categories of signals of how you are in this particular moment. You've now listened to the non-conscious because those signals are basically the non-conscious scanning, finding a thought tree and sending up those signals that are attached to that thought tree. So as you pay attention to them, you bring that thought tree into consciousness. That thought tree is that thing that looks like a tree in your brain and those rolled up things in your body, whatever, everything's activated. And as soon as we know from neuroscience, as soon as you are aware of a thought pattern, not all the details yet, but you've weakened the thought pattern. So you are weakening that network, and that network's what's driving you. So you use the signals to find the network. You then, by doing that, by paying attention, gathering awareness, you then bring it into the conscious mind and you weaken it. Now you are being empowered to take control. So now you go to the next stage, which is now you reflect. Okay, why do I have that emotion? What other emotions do I have? And you ask the why question around the 4 signals. Then you write that down. And when you write down, it's really important not to write like a journal. Don't go writing whole sentences. If you really want to dig deep and get insight and really activate that network that you can deconstruct it and reconstruct it right down to the roots being the source of where this thing started in the first place, the trunk being how you process it uniquely, the branches being how it's playing out in your life, and the self-talk and all that stuff. You want to dig deep. So the first 2 stages are helping open the door. It's like literally the door is locked. We can try all kinds of CBT, all kinds of great motivational affirmations, etc. We will not open the door until you go through a very sequential process that aligns with the psychoneurobiological network that needs to be, how it needs to be woken up so that you can rewire. And these steps I'm describing to you are doing that. So the first step, gather awareness, opens the door, brings the thought into consciousness, weakens the networks, the proteins, etc., and the chemicals. Then the second step adds to that weakening. And weakening means you can change it. It becomes malleable. Things that are malleable are changeable because you're now deconstructing. And then you're deconstructing right down to the root, which is the source. And then you can reconstruct. You can't eliminate, but you can deconstruct and reconstruct, which is reconceptualizing. So you'll always remember what happened to you, what you did, how you were, but you're now changing what it looks like. So you're changing how it drives you and therefore how it plays out into your future. So the third step is adding to this ability to do all of this stuff, and that's the right step. And it's important, as I mentioned, not to write in a journal stage. You can do that later, but not now. Now what you do is just a mind dump. Whatever comes up, you just grab that. So from the gather and reflect, it's stimulated a lot. And you just write as quick as you can all over the page, preferably all over the page, not in lines. If you want to put something like write a sentence, put it in a bubble. Try and write the words and I know it sounds crazy, but the more patterned, the more colorful, the more you're going to go deeper and create a synergy in the network that digs deeper. Then you're going to stop, and fourth step is you're going to look at what you've written to make sense. What's going on here? What are the patterns, the triggers? This is what's happened. What can I do about this? And so on. Then the fifth step is what's the action I'm going to take today? Now, that is a neurocycle. It's 5 steps of the neurocycle. And that is basically the system for how we can change drive neuroplasticity, which is the changes we want to make in our whole psycho-neurobiological network, not just the brain, the mind, brain, and body. And so the neurocycle is how you do that. It's the system, and within that you can put positive affirmations, cognitive behavior techniques, those kinds of things fit at step 5. Those are your actions. But if you don't have the prior steps, those actions become a band-aid. But if you put them at step 5, they become a solution. And so there's a huge difference there. So that's basically how you would start managing the process. Key thing here is if we've got an established pattern, and if you've been doing it for more than one day, then and most likely most addictions have been going on for months, if not years, that's going to require time to change. So habits don't form in 21 days. They also aren't changed in 21 days. From the research I've done and others, and we're doing a huge amount of research in this area, and I've just published a paper, we're about to publish another paper, we've got a big study running, another paper going at the end of the year. We have been looking, myself and my team, at how long does it actually take to go from that signal, find the root, deconstruct, reconstruct, all that stuff. And it's around about 9 weeks for one cycle. And in that one cycle, that's like one chunk. And you'd work for using the neurocycle daily for around 5 to 45 minutes. I wouldn't go longer than 45 because it's very, very tiring and your brain will run out of energy like a cell phone, and your conscious mind. And 5 minutes is kind of the minimum because you've got to get through 5 steps. And some days you'll do 5 minutes, some days you'll do 15. It depends on where you are in that cycle. The first 3 weeks are very overwhelming, very, you grieve, you feel more anxious, more depressed, your emotions are going to be high because you're starting to see stuff and it's very overwhelming and you're starting to deconstruct. By more or less 3 weeks, you're feeling a level of peace and you have a direction you want to go in. So you've healed the roots and you've started growing what you would like to be, that new thought you'd like it to be. So there's this new little thought, it's this big, not big, and how you were functioning is kind of half the tree, and how you want to function is the other half. If you stop here, you're going to revert back and get very stuck and get very frustrated. So what you need to do is before you start a new cycle, before you just think you've got it, you need to grow that tree and you need to reduce that side that's the toxic side down to just a teeny little branch and make it a nice big green tree. And that requires practicing this each day through the 5 steps for another at least 42 days, another 6 weeks. And I mean, this is honestly, that's a 2 to 5 minute process. So the second part is very quick, but you've still got to go through the 5 steps. That grows the tree, the strength of the healthy part reduces the toxic part to a very small, tiny little branch so that you can remember you may be triggered, but you now have the healthy tree that's thoughts, retrieving all the memories and thoughts, a new way of thinking, the new network is now going to be the one that drives you. And sometimes if it's a long-standing trauma, because addictions generally grow out of trauma, and trauma is big stuff. It's what's happened to us, the sexual, the verbal, the war trauma, all these bullying, excessive bullying, all those kinds of toxic breakdowns that happen to us, poverty, racism, etc. Those are big, and the more complex, the longer they've been there, the more neurocycles you need to do. So you're not going to get away with one neurocycle one day and think you're better. That doesn't work like that. So it's kind of that's kind of the big picture of the whole thing.
One of the things that I actually prescribe to patients is radical honesty. I say this month, when you're trying not to use, you can't tell a lie about anything. And it's not just that you can't lie about use. You can't even lie about why you were late for the meeting in the morning. You can't say the traffic was bad. You have to say, if someone asks you, hey, what's going on? You're late. You have to say, sorry, I just took too much time. I misjudged. I spent too much time drinking coffee and reading the paper. So you have to tell the truth about everything. Why is that so important? For a number of different reasons. But I'll start again with the pleasure pain balance. We have this incredibly keen memory for the initial stimulus, whether it's pleasure or pain, but we're almost amnestic for the gremlins, what happens as a result of that stimulus, right? We don't remember that. It's crazy. So for example, my patients will talk about this euphoric recall of using their drug as being one of the main triggers for them to relapse, but they cannot or have difficulty accessing the memory for all the terrible things that happened after they used. The same thing happens with painful stimuli, right? We have a really vivid memory for painful stimuli. Like every day when I get up and I tell myself I need to get out of bed and exercise, all I can think about is how I don't want to get out of bed and don't want to exercise because it hurts, right? What I don't remember vividly is that those gremlins are agnostic to which side of the balance they hop on. And if I press on the pain side with exercise, they'll hop on the pleasure side and I'll get my after exercise dopamine, my high, which is really great way to get dopamine, but I don't remember it. Every day I have to remind myself anew. How does this lead into telling the truth? The stories that we tell about our lives serve as a kind of extended memory for us to remember the gremlins that we are very liable to forget. So when we're telling other people what we're actually doing in detail, it becomes real to us. We rewrite our autobiographical narratives, right? And we can't no longer deny that the behavior is happening. And in doing that, in telling that story, those autobiographical narratives don't just organize past experience, they actually become a roadmap for the future, right? So that that person and I now together hold this narrative. We hold this roadmap. And if you're in a group, even a larger group, you hear other people talk. That reminds you about your own experience. It's like an extended hippocampus. We hold it together. And those words as tools and stories becomes the way then we can remember what really happens when we use our drug, which our own brains are liable not to allow us to remember, right? All we think about is, oh, that would feel so good if I really want to do that now. That would feel really good if I could do that right now, you know? And we don't remember all the horrible, we don't remember how it really stopped feeling good a long time ago. It stopped working. It doesn't even work, right? It doesn't even work. And then afterwards I feel horrible, right? I can't remember it. All I can think of is, oh, that would feel really good right now. So telling the truth becomes absolutely fundamental. Telling the truth to another human being who you trust is really important. Telling it in a group and hearing other people's stories becomes really important because, again, it's a way that we can keep those gremlins in mind. And then in the book, I talk at length about the way that truth-telling also fosters true intimacy. We think when people see, you know, all the icky things we've done that they'll go running, but actually they give us a big hug because we're all, you know, struggling in this life and you're not alone in our struggles. Also, I suspect that telling the truth, and by the way, the average adult tells 1 to 2 lies per day. So everybody lies. And telling the truth is actually, if you try to go through a whole day and not lie about anything, you'll find how hard it really is to do because we all kind of fudge it a little bit to make ourselves look better. But if we actually tell the truth about everything and we don't let ourselves try to look better, what it does is it upregulates the prefrontal cortex, or at least that's my hypothesis. And the prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain that allows us to delay gratification, to plan for future consequences. It's also the storytelling part of our brain. It's really connected to that pleasure-pain balance and those limbic or emotion structures, and is key for putting on the brakes on compulsive overconsumption.